How does that look? Full
Good.
screen? Okay, cool.
Great.
Awesome. We made it. Okay, so we're doing behavior management at home. So thanks everyone for coming. We kind of wanted to start with a quick little introduction. I'm Melina Signeri. I'm a lead BCBA at Chicago Pediatric Therapy and Wellness Center. I've been in the field for about 7 years, and then I have a special interest in social skills and acceptance and commitment therapy based curriculum. Um, Natalia.
I'm Natalia Velasco, and I'm a BCBA here at Chicago Pediatric Therapy and Wellness Center as well. I also have 7 years of experience in the field, and I'm currently a PhD student and an adjunct professor also for behavior analytic coursework at the Chicago School here.
Oh, hi. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi. So we've broken our kind of course up into 2 weeks. So this week we're going to go over an introduction, environmental manipulation, setting boundaries and expectations, using supports, consistency, and some action items that we can do over the next week. And then next week, we can do like a quick discussion points on the strategies that you guys were able to implement, little breakout rooms, which there's just a smaller number of pool of us, so we could probably all just collaborate together. And then a quick question and answer on things that worked and didn't work. So week one, behavior management.
So we wanted to start off with just a quick introduction and acknowledgement that, raising children can be really demanding and really rewarding. And a topic that is relevant to all families, despite, if you have neurotypical children or divergent children or anything, is that of behavioral management and support at home. And we recognize that our kids that we work with day in and day out usually have a little bit of a different kind of need and different supports that they might utilize in the home setting. And each of them are unique. Each family is unique, and not everything is going to work for everybody. But the focus of our presentation today is going over some kind of foundational topics and ideas that are helpful across the board, and that we can then take that main idea and make it unique to your learner, your child, and what works for your family at home. So starting off, we are going to do some environmental manipulations. So this is something that we focus on a lot at the clinic and at the academy, and a lot of what we do in behavior analysis or in any therapeutic environment is to set up our environment for success. So we want to kind of focus on what can we do antecedently. So before behaviors are even occurring, how can we change our environment and adapt our environment so that our child or our client is going to be successful and is hopefully going to minimize opportunities for those challenging behaviors to arise. And some of the few things that come to mind is, first and foremost, sanitizing the environment. This sounds really formal, but really all it means is kind of cleaning up your environment so that there's not a lot of sensory overload. There's not a lot of maybe clutter everywhere. There's not a lot of things that might trigger your child or something that might be an antecedent for your child to have some dysregulation emotionally or some frustration. And this can also include not only cleaning up the environment in the sense of making sure that there is nothing dangerous out, that maybe their table where they're going to eat is clear of cups of water or big glass items that might break or things like that. But also it could be adding things into the environment. So maybe adding a little box where you can put all of their toys, or adding a file folder for their papers or something where you can kind of keep everything organized and together, and try to avoid triggering any difficult behaviors. Something else that we like to do a lot in therapy centers and at school that we really recommend for the home is if you have especially a child that maybe when they're frustrated, they maybe like to dump things or throw things, or if they're engaging in any kind of tantrum where they look to their environment to see if there's something they can kind of throw or hit, is trying to put a lot of toys and things that have a lot of pieces in bins with lids. So kind of giving yourself a little bit of like that extra time, that extra second that if you see, oh, we're getting upset, we're getting frustrated, we might throw something, you are able to maybe like stop the bin or put the bin up on a shelf. And you don't have to deal with maybe like a dump or a throw, and then now having a little bit more of a chaotic environment to work through. Another thing that we recommend is enhancing safety. We do this at the clinic, but we also recommend at home that is, if there's anything that you notice might not be safe for your child, even if it's something that they will eventually grow out of or work through, making sure that you are making your home safe. So for example, if you have a client that elopes and runs out the front door or something like that, getting maybe like one of those like child locks for the door so they can't easily open the handle. Another thing is for some of our clients that may be engaged in some self-injury behavior, they might hit their head or something like that, you could get some foam pads to help kind of block any hard surface so that their head is not hitting against a wall or the floor and they have something soft that you can kind of help block with. Another idea that we have at the clinic is using blockers for like light switches or closing up maybe a closet that has electrical outlets or things like that. Because we know sometimes our kiddos don't recognize dangerous items or dangerous areas, or that's a skill that they're still working on. So trying to make sure you set your home up to be safe and hopefully diminish opportunities for anything that could be harmful to your child. And then the last point is having sensory items always available. So this is something that we're really big advocates for our kiddos, especially our neurodivergent kiddos. Sometimes their sensory needs look a little bit different than our sensory needs or what a neurotypical child might need for sensory regulation. So some ideas for this is like setting up a calming space. So some of our clients might have like a calming corner at home or a crash pad or a tent with maybe dimmed lighting. I know one of my clients has just his closet in his room. He doesn't use it for his clothes or his toys, and they've just made his closet kind of like a calming space where he has dimmed lights, he has his pillows in there, he has his fidgets in there, and that's like a space that he can go and kind of regulate on his own. Some other popular ideas are, of course, like chewy jewelry if you have a client that has oral sensory needs, stress balls, weighted blankets, swings, even if you have maybe a backyard or if you're able to put one indoors. I know some of our clients have them indoors too. Those are all popular ways that sometimes help our children kind of regulate themselves in their body. And here's just some ideas and some pictures of different things that we use around the clinic or what different locks could look like. And then that picture where there's a little girl reading is what we like to call a crash pad. But they sell, of course, all different kinds of these. They sell like smaller kind of like bean bags. They sell bigger ones. They sell some with plastic covers. So if you are worried about having to wash it often, you could get like a plastic cover one that just wipes clean. And these are really helpful for a lot of our kids that are seeking, Melina, maybe correct me if I say it wrong. I think it's proprioceptive input. What is it?
Yeah, for like the whole body, like we're having like all sensory exposure type of like, I think that can be impacted by like swings too for like the proprioceptive by like how the direction of their swing. But yeah, overall, great tool. I had a client had it in their basement and they only had the crash pad and like a rocking chair. So he was able to go get like the proprioceptive input on the like chair. And then he was able to like throw his body on the crash pad and it was 5 minutes. He was great.
And these crash pads are also really great sometimes for getting that input and getting that like full body sensory input before bedtime. So I know some of our parents that struggle with bedtime and struggle with like getting to a calm space before going to bed. Sometimes our OTs will recommend a sensory diet or a sensory routine that you can do before bedtime to kind of make sure that you're regulating their body, you're giving them all that input before you get ready for that transition to bedtime.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. The next kind of tools for our toolbox we have is setting boundaries and expectations. So this is more of the like verbal and vocal input we're adding into the situations in our environment rather than setting up our environment for success. So some ideas that we can do is priming, which is just one of those like ABA jargons that we use of just preparing a child for what is about to happen. So we can also review rules and expectations before an activity is going to happen. So an example, we're going to Target, and when we're going to get everything we need on the list first, if we're calm and we can have our calm body throughout the entire trip of mom or dad getting all of our items, then we can go to the toy section after. So you're setting clear expectations of what is required during the trip and also the behaviors that are required during the trip. And that's also kind of encompasses the first then language of if we do this, then this is going to happen. In order for a child or any kind of human being to learn, we have to know what is expected first and what the expectations are so that we're set up for success. The next kind of set is teaching versus supporting. These words are very, very similar, but they do kind of occur at different states of the body. So teaching, similar to priming, it happens before an expectation is put into place or behaviors happen. The child is happy, relaxed, and engaged, which is kind of a mantra that is sweeping over the ABA world. These moments happen before a challenging moment, which that might occur. So it looks like, so a good example of how we can vocalize a teaching or priming moment is, it looks like you're gonna go play with your brother. So fun. I know that losing can be hard. So practice taking deep breaths to stay calm. So kind of giving them an expectation of behavior, what's about to happen and what is the activity that they're doing can help prime a child and help teach them for what is to come. Supporting happens by reminding them of the skills that they've practiced. So they could be a little bit more escalated. They could have maybe forgotten to use their skills that they have used in the past. And you can use vocal examples of, I see that you're upset. Let's take deep breaths and practice before we join again. So it's kind of being more supportive in the fact that right now I'm not going to reiterate my expectation of you didn't take deep breaths. I'm going to be more supportive and look, these are some of the things that we've practiced. Let's work on getting our body back to happy, relaxed, and engaged so that we can get back to the learning and teaching moments and following through with some of those boundaries and expectations. So kind of continuing with setting these expectations, avoiding power struggles, hardest thing to do, honestly, whenever you're just quick to frustration and you're like, I told you this a million times. But we'd really, really try our best and kind of like our number one thing as BCBAs to parents of just try to stay, if you're not regulated, then that's a time too for you to like take a step back, regulate your own self, and then being able to present expectations to your child. So instead of engaging in negotiations and making threats to take away preferred items, try to validate emotions and set clear expectations proactively so that you can refer back to them in the moment. So instead of saying, kind of like my example before, like, I don't want to have to tell you this again. Try saying, I know you wanted to watch TV right now, but remember, referring back to an expectation, that we have to clean up toys before that can happen. Obviously easier said than done. You've told your child a dozen times to clean up the toys before they can watch TV, but ultimate route to success is through being happy, relaxed, and engaged. Being firm yet flexible. So kind of counterparts kind of both mean the opposite of each other, but it's all about balance. So we want to be firm in what our follow through is, so what our expected behavior is, but we can be flexible on how we get there. So let's go back to the cleaning up example. We really want our child to clean up and they're throwing down, to say the least. We can kind of take it slow. Hey, let's put one toy away and then I can turn the TV on. Okay, great, awesome. Turn the TV off. We can continue up the rest of our activity of cleaning up. Or you can even make it a game, make it fun. Like, oh, I'm gonna make this toy and shoot it into the basket or whatever. However, whatever your child's like special interests are is always really great to try to embed into certain tasks and activities. So it's always like good to like be a sort of like flexible type of like child thinking to kind of get into their perspective in their shoes too. Natalia unmuted herself.
I was just gonna share some examples from like experience with training both therapists and parents in the past, because I know being firm but flexible sometimes feels contradicting, or it feels like I might be doing something incorrectly, like not sure kind of where to draw the line. So some examples that I've had with some of my clients is one of my older kiddos that struggles with emotional regulation. We've worked on using coping strategies, and sometimes parents were feeling a little bit like, we are working on not hitting brother and he hit brother again. And then he wants the coping strategy of listening to music, which is something that he really likes and that helps him. So feeling a little bit like, well, are we rewarding, hitting because he's getting access to like his music, which he really loves. And something that I always try to give like my parents and my team is to remember that we are being firm on the expectation or whatever the boundary was, and then we are being flexible with how we stay firm to that. So if the expectation or the boundary is not hitting brother, or like having a calm body, or rejoining play with kind and safe, a kind and safe body, if we can get there by listening to music, that's okay, right? Right now, we're not worried about the boundary of like, oh, when is it music time, or when do we get our CD player, when do we get mom's phone? Like right now, what we're focused on is that boundary of like how to be safe with our body. So if we use other coping strategies and other things to get there, that's okay. What we don't want to kind of get messy with is like, okay, he wants to calm his body, he wants to give squeezes to his brother. Like, well, if right now we're working on keeping our hands to ourselves, keeping our body safe, being kind, then like maybe that's not the best strategy for now. But something else is definitely appropriate. And then similarly with like some of my younger clients, sometimes when we get super dysregulated, and we've had like a really big meltdown and we're finally getting to that like baseline level again, where we're seeing those signs of like, okay, we're not crying anymore. Our body is starting to be calm. Maybe we're still whining a little bit or still showing some signs of frustration, but we're feeling better. If they kind of initiate interaction with you, like they maybe want to start to play or they want to get a hug or something like that, like knowing that that's okay too in that moment, right? If we were like really upset because we can't go in the gym right now, and instead we want a hug and we want to play with some magnets or do some Play-Doh, that's okay. If we're still holding that boundary of like, hey, we still can't go to the gym right now, but I see that you're feeling better. I hear you asking for Play-Doh. Let's get the Play-Doh out and start playing with that instead. So always kind of remembering what is that original boundary that we're sticking to, and then being okay with flexibility elsewhere.
Perfect. And that kind of goes into like some more tools of using supports. So we all use supports. All supports might look different to each kid because every kid learns a little bit different and it's just unique in their own way. It's okay if you need more or different supports than others. When including a support, fading can look like a child using that support independently on their own. So I feel like I get a lot of questions of when we implement a timer or visual schedule, I immediately get a question of, okay, well, when can we fade this out? It's more so like what is going to be in the best use of the child. So if it is something that's too hard to carry over or like implement into everyday life, our goal is usually to always teach the child of like, okay, if this tool works for you, I'm going to teach you skills on how to implement this yourself. So I have quite a few clients that a timer is just super regulating and super calming for them, and predictability really helps them with regulation. So we have like worked on skills of setting their own timer. They have their own watch, or even they have an iPad at home, their own like personal use. And whether it's getting ready for a transition, getting ready to leave for the house, or even getting ready for like our morning routine of like, hey, we have this amount of time but for you to get dressed, brush your teeth, XYZ, whatever works best within the schedule. And having the child participate and be a part of that support system is only going to teach them that, like, I can use these supports when I need them. And maybe they don't need them every time, but it's always good to have, tools in their toolbox for those scenarios that they do. So it's all about what's calming, and learning style is most comfortable for the child, and using them is not a bad thing. I use them every single day, honestly. That's how I reminded myself for this meeting and to get ready for this meeting. So examples though, we as adults use supports, calendar invites, setting alarms, even post-it notes. I have post-it notes all over my desk of things that I need to get done. Does anyone else use supports that help them with tasks that they need to get done like on a daily basis?
I always like to give the example too of I use a lot of video modeling. So I know like for our clients, sometimes having maybe like pictures in the shower of steps for showering, or pictures by the sink of washing hands. I myself feel like I use these type of visual supports a lot when I don't know how to do something or can't remember. So even if, for example, I've changed the oil in my car 20 times, every time I have to do it, I still look up a video on YouTube to like make sure, because I forget which one I need to open or which one I need to close, how to pour the oil in correctly. So those are kind of some examples that we maybe don't think of those initially as a visual support, but really that is what it is. And a lot of our kiddos need those visual supports too throughout their life, even into adulthood, and that's okay, even if they look a little bit different than maybe what we use every day.
That's okay. We don't. Thanks for sharing, Natalia. Does anybody else want to share their supports, or we can always move on to the next thing? It's quite all right.
We are very into timers at home, but James is very visual, so we have like a chick timer and a rainbow timer, and like basically he knows that the chick timer is the timer we use in the kitchen, and the rainbow timer is now the one that we're using in the bathroom.
Nice.
And we had him like choose the timers.
That's perfect.
Yeah, like everything at home we do like visually, like by colors, even his clothes and stuff. Like what's like for like his shoes has to be like blue shoes are for school and orange Crocs are for outside the deck or stuff like that. I don't know.
I love that. It's kind of a like natural way of setting boundaries of how you can implement of like safe shoes to wear in certain areas and linking it to a special interest of colors. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. We can go to the next one, which kind of just visuals of visuals, visuals of supports. So we've got some timers. You guys have seem to be familiar with like different types and different presentations of timers. We've got a visual schedule over here on the left. And then below are these cushions, Natalia?
Yeah, there's like for sitting. I feel like these are used a lot in classrooms, but sometimes for also if you maybe want to teach like toys stay in the playroom or things like that, like having a more visual, like a carpet or a mat or like a dot for like, hey, can you sit right here and wait, can help.
Perfect. I was like, I wanted to ask, but great. It's always great to, have multiple things in the arsenal. So we also have a coping skills card for kids, so they can either point, or sometimes in the clinic we have a lot of like pulling off Velcro options. So it's a little bit more intentional of like which one that they want to try or practice or, implement into their day. We use a token board, so kind of really like reinforcing and telling them that they're doing an amazing job, whether in academy or in one-on-one clinic sessions, just so they know exactly what their expectations are and that they know that they're doing them. I also added a contingency map, which I didn't go super into depth, and the next couple of slides, but this is kind of just a if we do this, this happens. If we do that, that happens. It's a very clear cut, dry. I've had a lot of clients that like this visual contingency of if I can sit quietly and calmly during circle time, then I get to do the swing right afterwards, like during the academy session or whenever they're like listening to the teacher talk. Or if I'm kicking or throwing toys, then I might not be able to go into the gym and swing right afterwards. So it's kind of like letting the clear expectations happen before, like visually showing them before the behavior even occurs, and just letting them know like what would happen, and there's no surprises of why we might not be able to go to the gym right after this behavior happens. Natalia was talking about the jewelry. So obviously like sensory needs, any oral input needed can be super regulating for a child. And just like being able to get it all out kind of can help, and they can wear it. And it's, you know, that support is on them at every moment of the day if they want to wear it. We have a lot of kids that take them off and woo, swing them around, and that happens. Consistency is important.
So our next point, and this is going to be a few slides where I'm just going to briefly go over like the main reasons why consistency is so important for children, for setting routines and expectations. It all kind of flows together. And so the first one is, of course, predictability. So consistent routines provide a predictable environment. And for a lot of our kiddos, that's super, super important. And some of them might even show like an interest in predictability. A lot of our kiddos engage in like what, you know, medically we like to refer to as like rigid or repetitive movements or routines. And sometimes predictability is a part of that, right? Like I like to turn the light on and off because I know exactly what's going to happen. I like to open the door and close it, or I like to do the same activities every time I go to the gym. And kind of like creating those routines sometimes is like comforting and also regulating for our kids. So if you're able to like embed consistency and predictability at home, sometimes that can be very regulating and help with lowering instances of behavior. The next point I have is understanding. So for all kids, and I would argue even for all adults and humans, and non-humans actually, repetition helps us understand what's expected and helps us learn. So in different situations, it might help kind of promote better comprehension of what's the boundary and what's the expectation, right? If one time we did it a certain way and the next time it happened a different way, it might be hard for a young kid to understand like what exactly is expected of me in this environment or in this situation. But if we're able to like repeat the same consequences, repeat the same instructions, repeat the same calming strategies, that will help with understanding. And another super important one for a lot of our kiddos that get a bit anxious is reducing anxiety. So a big piece of knowing the expectation and knowing the boundaries is knowing that it's also going to decrease uncertainty and lower stress for our kids, which is very beneficial for our kiddos that might struggle with unexpected changes, especially reducing kind of like that factor of not knowing what comes next. A lot of our visual schedules are great examples of how knowing what to expect might help a kid kind of flow through their day. So even if they really hate math or they really love the gym, if they don't know when math time is coming up or when they get to go to the gym, they might just be a little bit extra anxious all day, not knowing and wondering, what if I don't get to go to the gym at all? What if math time is the first thing we're going to do? But if you're able to show them like, okay, we're doing morning circle, then math, snack, then gym, that in itself might lower their anxiety and help them kind of get through their day. And they might still hate math and still really want to go to the gym before it's time, but at least you're kind of removing that factor where they know, okay, math is next. I don't love it, but I know that after that I have snack and I do get to go to the gym today because I see that it's on the schedule. So that could be really helpful. The next few points kind of all flow from the first few. So skill development kind of goes hand in hand with understanding. Consistency and routines can help them develop skills like time management, organization, and task completion. And this is especially true actually in the home, I would say more so than at the clinic. Because if you have consistent like morning routines, bedtime routines, or consistent even like dinner expectations, going out to a restaurant expectations, that can help the kids develop their own time management, right? Of like, oh, every morning, my mom is setting a timer for 10 minutes before I have to get out of bed, or 10 minutes before breakfast is ready, or something like that. And they'll start to comprehend that time management of like, oh, when the timer goes off, now it's time to eat. Or they'll start getting involved, right? Like, I want to set the timer. Or you might even start to see like negotiating, which shows you that they understand time management when they ask for more minutes, or they ask for 10 minutes instead of 5, which is kind of showing you like, okay, they're starting to understand this concept of time. Whereas if you don't practice often with some of our newer kiddos, for example, I'll ask them like, hey, do you want like 5 minutes or 8 minutes? And they're like 5, right? And you can kind of tell like, okay, like they're not really sure which one is giving them more time yet. But as they practice that skill and see like, oh, 5 minutes was shorter, 10 minutes felt really long, they'll start to learn those skills. And then it'll help them too with like organizing their day, knowing, like, oh, I have 10 minutes to play before I get breakfast. So like maybe I don't have time for my favorite, going outside and scootering around the block, but I have enough time to watch a video or play with some of my toys. And then task completion as well. So practicing things consistently, like self-dressing or like eating skills, hygiene skills, they'll naturally get better and better. The next one, is a sense of security. So familiar routines create a sense of security and stability. For some of our kiddos too that don't have maybe a lot of communication that they've developed yet, and they're not able to functionally and consistently communicate their needs and wants, it can be good to create routines, not only to like facilitate some communication because they know what's coming next, or what's expected of them, but also to help them feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in their environment, even if there's still some skills that they need to work on. And then the last one, the super important one, since we're talking about behavior management, for this slide, is helping with behavior. So clear expectations and boundaries that are consistent help our kids know what's acceptable and what's not, leading to fewer instances of confusion or frustration. So there might be times when they know what's expected and they know the boundary, but they, break it anyway, or they engage in the behavior that's not going to get them the swing time or something like that. But there's sometimes where they might be confused and genuinely frustrated because they don't know the expectation, or this is the first time they've done something. And then we're having like a lot of dysregulation, or some difficult behaviors as a result. And then these are the last few. So it facilitates learning, flowing from the past 2 slides. The consistency is going to help our kids focus on learning new skills because they can rely on familiar structures and patterns. So for example, to use one of the scenarios that I've been talking about with a morning routine, if we have a client that has a hard time with self-dressing or has a hard time with sitting at the table for breakfast, if you're setting up a consistent routine and you have your supports and you have your timers, because there's not going to be as much frustration coming from not knowing what's next, or anxious about how much time they have to play before they have to go to breakfast, or anxious about, is mom going to help me get dressed today, or am I doing it myself? If all of those factors are eliminated, then you're able to really hone in on the learning, right? Where like they know what's coming, they know the order, they know how it's going to happen, and you can just focus on like, hey, I know it's really hard for you to do your pants by yourself. But because we are overall more regulated and emotionally engaged, happy, ready to learn, we can focus on actually learning that skill of let's put our pants on, or let's go sit at the table for breakfast, because we're not feeling as dysregulated or anxious. This in turn enhances independence. So with their consistent routines, they start to become more independent. They start to show more autonomy, right? Like if they know that when the timer goes off, it's time for breakfast, then they might start going to the kitchen all by themselves instead of you having to go grab them. Or something that I notice in our academy setting is the cleanup song, right? It's so consistent that our teachers sing or play a cleanup song when it's time to clean up, that they get to a point where the teacher plays the cleanup song and she doesn't even have to say anything. She doesn't have to help. The therapists don't have to step in and give instructions. The kids just hear that and they know, oh, every time I hear this, I have to clean up. So I'm going to start cleaning up all by myself and look around and see what's next. The next one is that it supports transitions. So for a lot of our kiddos, something that is really hard is transitioning between activities or between environments, and consistency in routines can help that go a little bit smoother, reducing likelihood of meltdowns or disruptions in that transition period from maybe like a really preferred activity to a less preferred activity, or transitioning from like one environment to another. So maybe from home to the car or from the park back home, and things like that. And then the last one, and one of my favorite ones, is for our kiddos that are still working on their communication skills. Consistency can be one of the biggest communication aids that you have at home that you don't have to put a lot of extra effort into. So if you're setting up predictable routines that serve as cues for communication, you're kind of giving your kids a comfortable place and like a comfortable way that they can be a little bit more confident in expressing their needs and preferences more effectively, right? So if they're working on maybe asking for their preferred foods or asking for more time, if they know that every morning there's going to be a timer and at the end of the timer I have to go eat breakfast, then they can start to work on like, okay, when the timer goes off, I'm going to ask for more play or I'm going to ask for more time. And it gives that opportunity every single day. So if you're really focusing on like, I want my child to, ask me when they want more time, or I want them to tell me what they want to eat, having the consistency of like, hey, every single day it's going to happen and it's going to happen the same way kind of opens the door for them to use that communication that they have, and practice it in a place that is safe, that they're confident in, and that they're comfortable in as well.
So, kind of like wrapping things up a bit, we do have some action items of things that we want you guys to try over the next week. You don't have to try every single one. I mean, I do maybe recommend the consistency one, if that's the one that we're picking. But just kind of seeing what fits best into your guys' everyday lives, into your, what works best for your child and best for your family. So using the use of the visual schedules like we talked about before, making your daily home routine, either morning, evening, weekend times, calming corners, really setting up a safe space for your child to work on regulation, and just like a go-to place that you can always instruct them of like, hey, during those supportive times, here's some strategies and some places to help work with regulating our body. Safety measures, coming up with ideas for any small manipulations that might increase safety in the home. So like we talked about before, locked cabinets, switches, bins with lids, locked bins, things like that, that can help give you a little bit more time in setting up the environment. A visual menu, so making for dinner times, a visual menu of safe foods for your child to be able to choose for a snack that they want at home, so they can just point, or like we like to use Velcro at the clinic of pulling off and giving to you. Can help with that communication aid piece that like Natalia was talking about. Consistency, just being able to have your like same routine, same expectations, same boundaries, as close and similar as possible every single day. Every day is going to be different, but just trying to keep consistency in mind is kind of the overall goal with that. Expectations and prime lists, these are always great for like learners that are starting to emerge more with reading, or if you read to them and it kind of clicks and they're like, okay, got it. Kind of having those visual rules, reminders of 2 to 3 rules during this activity. These are the behaviors we're going to engage in. So with playing a game with your brother, we're going to keep our hands to ourselves and we're going to keep a calm voice. Those are 2 expectations that we're going to have when we're playing with our sibling. things like that. And going to Target. We all love going to Target. Kind of expected behaviors during those types of community activities as well. And timers, collaborating with your child on what type of timer or counting method might be most preferred. I've had multiple clients even just be like, I like countdowns. Or even I've had a client tell me, can you just count in your head and tell me like when it's time? And I'm like, okay, that's fine. If that's your preferred method, I'm gonna, accustomed to like what is gonna make you the most comfortable. So kind of just a couple of ideas for that.
Also, I want to add in I only listed this under consistency, but I know a lot of times we have like all these great ideas and all these things that could help at home, and then you try it out at home, and there's kind of roadblocks or barriers that come up that make it hard to implement. So something that we want to kind of workshop through next week too is if you come up with maybe like a visual schedule at home, and then you run across a challenge of like, oh, I keep losing all of the icons from my visual schedule, and so now I can't even use it. Like bringing those challenges next week as well, because we'll do a lot of problem solving next week, and we can offer like ways to adapt a visual schedule so there are no icons that you can lose, or different ideas for how to make it work for your family and your home. Every family is different, every home is different, every child is different. So we kind of want you to think of like the first idea, or kind of come up with something that you really want to do or you think would be most helpful. And then we can go from there and help with any adaptations that you may need, or provide some like extra ideas for other ways that you could implement any of these items.
Okay, that's all we got. But we'll see you guys next week. And like Natalia said, let us know how we can help and what's working and what's not working, and we can kind of collaborate from there.
Thank you
Thank
guys so much.
you.
I'm gonna stop the recording, and then I will send the
Thank you.
slides and everything to you guys later in an email.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.